Hi, welcome to Hollywood Crime Scene. This is Rachel Fisher.
Hi, this is Desi Jedeikin. I'm very husky this week.
You're very sexy sounding this week.
It's just real sexiness. It's not illness at all.
Welcome back, Des.
It's a new year.
Happy New Year.
You too.
I
2018. Woohoo.
Woohoo.
Everything will change.
Mm-hmm.
How was your Christmas?
My Christmas was good. I went home to see my family in San Francisco. I ate a lot. I had a really good breakfast at my mom's house on Christmas morning.
Yum.
I'm just thinking about it because it was like...
What was it?
It was basically like bread pudding, but
I made that for Christmas too.
Yeah.
It was like a cinnamon toast, French toast, but you bake it and you marinate it overnight in a custard. It was really good.
Yeah, basically that's what I had on Christmas morning.
That's good.
We're Jews who celebrate Christmas.
Yeah.
Because why not?
It's a good holiday.
It's a good holiday. It's like full of food and gifts.
You don't have to put the Christ in Christmas if you don't want to.
Well, we do not put the Christ in Christmas. We put the...
Were you grateful that you were able to say Merry Christmas again this year, Rachel?
Oh my God, I was so grateful. Like, because, you know...
It's been a war on Christmas, and I will tell you, it's been a devastating... Thank God we have someone in charge who was brave enough to finally let that happen again.
I agree.
Praise Jesus. So, do we have any updates?
We had a bunch
I say knowingly. Yes, we do have some updates.
We do have some updates, and the updates are that we had a bunch of Patreon contributors over the holiday break, to which I was very... Oh, shit.
Is it not recording?
No, it's recording.
Oh, okay, good.
It's recording.
I got scared because you said, oh, shit.
I said, oh, shit, because the headphones came out for a second.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We do have a lot of new Patreons, and should I thank these people?
Please.
Okay. So I'm trying to think where we left off, but I'm going to start here on the 21st because that seems about when our last show was.
Yeah.
Okay, we have Michael, we have Kay Wallace, Sasha Lipgloss. Sasha.
I really like that name.
That's a really good name. Amy, thank you. Lauren, Carolyn, Mitchell, Rosemary, Louise, and Alvina is the last pledge. Last but not least, thank you guys.
Thank you guys so much.
It really helps us.
Yeah.
As we said before. And I think we've almost reached our first goal.
We have.
So we'll be doing a poll soon about what the next, they'll pick the listeners will pick the topic.
The listeners are going to get to pick our next show once we reach $500 for our Patreon.
Yeah. So
that'll
be cool.
there.
And then we'll come up with a new goal and a new reward.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And then we've also had a lot of new people join our Facebook group.
Right.
That's a really fun group.
I really like it.
I'm going to try to post more in the new year, but I've been sick for 2 weeks, so.
That's why Desi sounds so husky right now.
Right. I have been sick for 2 weeks, so I'm in absolute misery, but I'm still doing the show because I'm a fucking hard worker.
Desi has an incredible work ethic.
Yeah, I'm very...
She has her sexy glasses on right now.
I do. I'm completely in research mode. Sexy,
Sexy research.
True crime doesn't stop just because I get sick. So we did have an update. Did you look into that? I think on our last show we were talking about the Jenny Jones murder.
Right.
And what kind of goes into play when you're dealing with guests who might have problems, right?
Right. Well, we also mentioned the Dr. Phil show during the last half of that episode, and I am in the camp who is suspicious and sort of skeptical of like airing out your group therapy for television.
Right.
Or any kind of like rehab show. I feel like
I definitely don't think it's good for them, but I do enjoy watching it.
Of course.
Like it's like a tricky, I do know it's probably wrong.
I have a lot of feelings about it, and I think most of the time it's not used with the intent of really helping people, more just to capitalize on pain.
I'm sure there's a lot
drama.
of thinking going on with these people where they do think they're doing good.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I
There's
mean?
some mental gymnastics
Yeah,
happening.
there's definitely some mental gymnastics happening, I think.
But it was
they have to know.
revealed this week, there was a news story that the Dr. Phil show specifically, which is the show that I was coming down hard on last week or a couple weeks ago, was they were actually providing alcohol to their guests who were there for drug and alcoholism.
Right. And that's kind of something that the Jenny Jones show did too. Didn't they get them?
Well, they
with
were
alcohol?
like, hey, we have a free bar tab.
Have some tequila.
Yeah, loosen up before the show. And basically that's what the Dr. Phil show was doing too. Of course, they denied it. They also used the excuse, well, alcoholics and drug addicts are unreliable witnesses.
Right. Which is true.
Which is true.
But you can't use that for your own bad behavior.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, so basically the Dr. Phil show was pretty much doing that.
Yeah, they were shady, just as I suspected.
Dun dun.
Dun dun. That's the gavel. We'll put it in.
Okay. And then we did see something, I can't remember the exact story. There was a state, I think it was Illinois.
It was Illinois.
That was going to eliminate using the gay panic as an excuse for murder, which is great.
Which is great and also sad when you realize that there's only 2 states in the country currently that have that law. It's Illinois and California.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So most states, that's still a viable
You
defense.
can still use the gay panic defense, which is absolutely insane to me.
Yeah. So
But congrats to Illinois
for being
on the right side of history.
right. Okay. So then I guess that's all.
That's all our updates.
That's all the updates we have right now. Okay. So today I am going to talk to you, Rachel, and listeners about an insane case. It's the serial killer Rodney James Alcala, who is also known as the dating game killer. Do you know about him?
I know that there was a murder about the dating game. I don't know the details of this case, and I'm very excited to hear about it.
Rodney, it's actually kind of surprising. I mean, I did hear about him. I think it was in 2010 when he was on trial again. I'll get into that later. And they had the clip of the dating game show that he was on, and we'll post that somewhere. Right. So that was kind of where I first heard about him also. And I think that was, as I said, 2010. The interesting thing to me about him is that he is a pretty prolific serial killer.
Yeah.
But he's hardly ever mentioned like with the heavy hitters or the big names.
He's not a household name at all.
No. He's often compared to Ted Bundy, and several people involved in the case referred to him as like a killing machine.
Yeah.
He had a lot of similarities with Ted Bundy, actually. Some of them, they both targeted women and sometimes children. Both have killed in multiple states across the country. Both killed their victims either by strangling them or with blunt force. And for both of them, the last known victim that they murdered were both 12-year-old girls.
Wow.
So they have some similarities, and they both had that kind of sociopathic, charming,
the charming
fuckboy, and both were kind of good-looking,
right.
Even though I don't personally find them good-looking.
Good-looking for a serial killer.
Both of them had that charm and good looks that were. Rodney was in particularly very like 70s. Like he seems like someone my mom probably would have fucked.
Did he have feathered hair?
He had that kind of longish. I don't know if it was feathered, but it was wavy.
Yeah.
You know,
like a Peter Frampton.
Right. And when he's in trial as an older man, his hair is hilariously bad.
Okay,
just
cool.
like crunchy gray.
Love it. We're going to post pictures.
We'll post a lot of pics. Anyways, the other thing about Alcala is that he did the whole luring women in with the photography. He was a professional photography who did this kind of thing.
You could be a model.
Yes. So as I said before, he's not as big of a name as far as serial killer goes, but he was quite prolific, and he killed over a very long period of time. He was also really sadistic, like kind of similar to the Hillside Stranglers. He didn't just kill his victims. He would like play around with them, toy with them, strangle them to the point of unconsciousness, and then wait for them to revive before killing them. And sometimes he would let that go on several times, which was very similar to like Angelo Buono,
right?
Where they would kind of torture their victims for a long period of time before actually killing them. Okay, so that's sort of a little bit of the background, and now I'm going to get into his early life. because we all want to know about the childhood of.
I love hearing about their early lives.
He had some interesting things. Okay, so he was actually born Rodrigo Jacques Alcala Bucor in San Antonio, Texas, to Raul Bucor and Ana Maria Gutierrez. In 1951, the father moved the family to Mexico, actually, but he kind of ditched the family there 3 years after moving to Mexico, and then the mom moved Rodney and his siblings to Los Angeles. He joined the Army in 1960 at the age of 17. In 1964, he actually had a nervous breakdown while in the Army, and he went AWOL. He hitchhiked from Fort Bragg back to his mom's home, and he was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder by a military psychiatrist, and he was eventually discharged on medical grounds because he was crazy. He actually was diagnosed with several other things by psychiatric experts over the period of his life, including during his trials, including surprise narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, and a homicide expert named Vernon Geberth diagnosed him with malignant narcissistic personality disorder with psychopathy and sexual sadism comorbidities, which I don't know what that means. Tell me. I have no idea. I'm white trash. So he had a lot of issues. He actually had a very high IQ, though, which I think is also kind of common with a lot of killers.
Yeah.
Like, they're insane, but they're smart, which is probably something you need to get away with stuff like this for a long, extended period of time. Or at least the confidence of smartness where you think you can trick everybody, right? There's like some kind
Those are the worst people.
yeah. So he did eventually, I did see like most reports I saw that he had an IQ of 130, which is very high. And then I did see one that said 160. So somewhere in that range, right?
I feel like we need to abolish IQ as a standard for smartness, for intelligence.
Well, I don't think it should be the only standard, but it is definitely something.
It's always like
grade.
math questions, and I'm terrible at math.
Basically, Rachel has a low IQ, and she wants us to change the rules. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm bad at math too. Or actually, it's not that I'm bad, but I just don't care.
Right.
Like if I've taken those tests, I'm like, oh, what am I fucking doing? I don't care. Like what my IQ is.
Right.
I'm not sitting here doing boring math.
I don't know what my IQ is. I think I got an IQ test when I was like 16, but I don't remember what it was.
I think my IQ is very high, but it's not high, and I could do math, but I don't fucking care. I'm not taking an IQ. I'm sure I'm smarter than the serial killer. Come on. He did go to UCLA School of Fine Arts. So I don't know. UCLA, good job.
Great job.
Letting in a serial killer. He's artistic. So he did eventually kind of develop a style. I think I mentioned the torturing and the choking. He did a lot of things that were considered his signature style, which is a weird thing to describe someone's killing and not like their outfits, right? But he did things like beating, biting, raping, strangling. I mentioned the choking to the point of unconsciousness and back and forth. And that actually started with his first victim, who was named Tali Shapiro, and she was an 8-year-old girl that he lured into his apartment in 1968. So this is his first known victim, an 8-year-old girl, and he lured her in with the photography.
An 8-year-old.
An 8-year-old. So this isn't obviously not modeling, but like, hey, like,
let me take your picture.
Let me take your picture. Whatever. So the interesting thing about this case, and there's a movie I was watching on, what's it called? Discovery ID?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll tell you about that at the end. And it opens up with this scene. He, gets this little girl. He is seen taking her into the apartment by a motorist who actually calls police while he sees this guy taking. So it's like this smart motorist. I mean, this is 1968. So you don't have a cell phone. You have to go to a real effort to call the police here in this situation. So he lures this 8-year-old girl named Tali Shapiro into his apartment. Luckily, this motorist sees it and finds it suspicious and calls police. The police show up at some point, bursting into the door, and they find her barely alive. She had been raped, beaten with a steel bar, but Alcala had fled by the time the police came.
Wow.
So I don't know if he heard the police come and then left at that moment or what. So obviously this is a huge deal. I mean, we all know a little white girl getting near murdered and beaten and raped is going to be a huge manhunt for this perpetrator. But Alcala actually evaded arrest. He left state and enrolled in NYU Film School, where he studied under, this is amazing, Roman Polanski.
No shit.
Yeah. Roman Polanski is actually the one who taught Alcala how to use the camera that he later used for his fashion photography. And I'm going to talk more about these pictures at the end.
Let me just a little aside. There's like the famous joke, if only Hitler had gotten into art school.
Right.
Well, this guy did get into art school.
And it's still.
And he still was a piece of shit. So there's that goes out the window.
So he actually applied to NYU under the alias or whatever named John Berger. So it's Berger. I'm amazed how many good schools he got into. Was it just way easier to get into like UCLA and NYU back at like, how do you just move to New York and be like, hey, I'm going to go to NYU now and study under Roman Polanski? Because it's like nowadays getting into college is so fucking hard. So this is a person who's on the run. He also, this is 1971 at this point, he got a job at a New Hampshire arts camp for kids. And he had a slightly different alias, John Berger, spelled like the hamburger. So he switched it up a bit for some reason. It was during this period in 1971, June, that a woman named Cornelia Michael Criley, a 23-year-old TWA flight attendant, was found raped and strangled in her Manhattan apartment. Now, this murder went unsolved until it was connected to Rodney Alcala in 2011.
Yeah.
So he did it at this time, but no one knew. It was an unsolved case for many years, and I'm going to touch on that a bit later on. At this point, he was identified as the person who attacked Tali Shapiro, and he was added to the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitive list in early 1971. It was actually 2 kids who attended the arts camp who turned him in. They noticed his picture on the poster in the post office.
Yeah.
And they fucking turned him in like little badass girls. So he was extradited back to California. Unfortunately, Tali Shapiro's parents had relocated the family by that point to Mexico, actually, and they didn't want her to testify at his trial. Which is probably understandable, but frustrating.
Right.
Because she's a little girl still. She's probably only 13 at this point.
You don't want to put her through that trauma.
Because of that, though, unfortunately, they were unable to convict him of rape and attempted murder because they didn't have their primary witness. And he pled guilty to a lesser charge of assault. Back in this time, there was something called indeterminate sentencing, which was something that allowed people to get released on kind of good behavior or demonstrating that they had been rehabilitated. And this was often used for sex crimes, which is insane to me because, I mean, obviously we don't do this anymore. So he ended up only serving 17 months in prison for this attempted murder and rape of this 8-year-old girl. In 1974, he was released. And less than 2 months after he was released, he was rearrested for assaulting a 13-year-old girl who was identified as Julie J. in the court records. He supposedly or allegedly, or I guess he was convicted, I don't know, forced her to smoke marijuana and kissed her. And he was also obviously violating his parole. So he was sentenced to 2 more years of indeterminate sentencing. So once again, he got the indeterminate sentencing and was released after 2 years for showing that he had been rehabilitated. But it's like, haven't you already proven
he hasn't been
that you haven't? If you're like arrested 2 months after, that's not rehabilitated.
Right.
Like,
this is a pattern.
Yeah. So after that release, his parole officer let him leave the state to travel to New York City for some reason. even though he had already shown that he was sort of a flight risk based on the fact that he left after the initial crime with
Right.
Charlie. So a week after arriving in Manhattan, he killed a woman named Ellen Jane Hover, who was 23 years old. She was actually the daughter of the owner of Hollywood nightclub Ciro's.
Oh, didn't we talk about Ciro's being haunted?
Yeah, we did
Wow.
in that bonus episode, or I can't remember.
Mini
Yeah,
episode.
mini. She was actually the goddaughter of Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. So this is like a socialite, highly connected, rich young woman.
And he murdered her.
Her remains were actually buried on the Rockefeller Estate in Westchester County, which is just north of Manhattan. A very rich
Area.
Yeah. Her date book actually showed that she had a meeting with John Berger on the night that she disappeared. When Alcala actually went back to LA and he got a job as a typesetter for the Los Angeles Times, the FBI had connected him to his old alias, and they questioned him about Ellen's death. He confessed to knowing her, but denied committing the murder. And at that point, her body hadn't been found yet, so they let him go. So basically, she was a missing person. They had the date book with his name in it, and they questioned him. But
Right.
because there was no body, there was nothing to be done at that point. In 1978, Alcala was actually also interviewed by members of the Hillside Strangler Task Force as part of their investigation. They were questioning known sex offenders.
If he was the Hillside Strangler.
Right, so they questioned him in that case also. And he was obviously ruled out as the Hillside Strangler, but he was arrested and served a brief sentence for marijuana possession. So I guess when they went to question him, they found pot on him, etc. Okay, so at this point, he has murdered at least a few women. He has the known criminal record with the two young girls, the
That he
13-year-old
assaulted.
and the 8-year-old. He served over 34 months in prison for rape and beating. He has been on the FBI's most wanted list, and he gets selected to be a bachelor on the dating game show.
Jesus.
He was tall and handsome and charming, as we've kind of mentioned before. And I guess the producers at that time didn't do things like background checks, because this isn't someone who was doing this shit and hadn't been caught. He has a record. I mean, you're one of the 10, like on the FBI 10 most wanted list is a pretty big deal. You'd think that you wouldn't be put on a game show.
I find it so outrageous that the producers were that fucking dense.
I mean, it's pretty amazing.
It's pretty
I think when I
amazing.
initially heard that he was on the dating game, I just assumed no one knew. Like, I didn't realize he had this huge,
That's what I always
extensive
thought about this
criminal
case.
record already. I mean, he hadn't been convicted of murder yet, but certainly rape and like attempted
Assault.
murder and assault
Being on
should
the
be
FBI's
enough, right?
most wanted list.
Yeah, so I thought that was pretty
So was
amazing.
he still going by John Berger?
No, he went on as his name, his real name, onto the dating game show. So this is in 1978. He's on this show, The Dating Game, which is like a hilariously campy. Did you ever watch that show?
I've seen episodes of
yeah.
it before, and and in the mid
It's
90s when they
very-
get singled out, it was kind of similar.
Yeah, it's very campy and lots of sexual innuendo and like
It's so 70s.
it's really goofy. Yeah. The host of the show is named Jim Lang, and he introduced Alcala as a successful photographer who got his start. Who got his start when his father found him in the darkroom at the age of 13, fully developed. Between takes, you might find him skydiving or motorcycling. Another one of the bachelors on the show with Alcala, he was bachelor number 2, and his name was Jed Mills. He's an actor. He described Alcala as a very strange guy with bizarre opinions. And Alcala really hammed it up on this show. He kind of would respond to the Bachelorette's suggestive questions. The questions are always kind of like, you know, kind of trying to elicit some kind of funny, sexually
There's
inappropriate.
like dick innuendos.
Right. And he likened himself to a banana at one point and said that nighttime is when he gets really good and he at some point acted out the part of a dirty old man, which is all kind of creepy after the
In
fact.
hindsight, it's very creepy.
So Alcala was bachelor number 1, and Jed Mills, the bachelor number 2. He goes on to say, he was a really creepy guy, a real idiot. This creep comes up to me and puts his face practically in my face and says, I always get the girl.
Gross.
I love how like Jed Mills, it's like, even though this is a serial killer, a part of him is probably still mad he lost or something. He's like,
totally.
Can you imagine losing to a serial killer? Like, I'm a good guy. You know what I mean? It's like the ultimate, like,
Right. It's
and
the
then-
ultimate. Why don't the girls
yeah,
like
why
the
don't
nice
the girls
guys?
like the nice guy? They never pick me. When I think about what he said, I always get my girl. He kills them. That was what he was talking about, but he's not telling us that. Obviously, it's like, okay, Jed, calm down. Jed also had this to say about Rodney. Rodney was kind of quiet. I remember him because I told my brother about this one guy who was kind of good looking but kind of creepy. He was always looking down and not making eye contact. He became very unlikable and rude at some point and imposing as though he was trying to intimidate. I wound up not liking the guy, not wanting to be near him. He got creepier and more negative. He was a standout creepy guy in my life. Jed seems to be really like rolling with this 15 minutes of fame.
Also, I feel like 50% of me probably, Jed probably never even gave him a second thought back then.
Right,
while he
but
was
after
on.
the fact, he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to
He's like,
find...
yeah, he was really creepy. I remember. And let me tell you why I remember. Like,
He has, because his stuff is like, they're not very specific details.
right.
The woman who did picked Rodney was named Cheryl Bradshaw.
So he won the dating game.
He won the dating game. He said to her apparently after the show, I guess backstage, we're going to have a great time together, Cheryl. I'm sorry. But Cheryl actually refused to go out with Rodney. She found him really creepy, and she said that when they were backstage talking, this is a quote from her, I started to feel ill. He was acting really creepy. I turned down his offer. I didn't want to see him again.
How did she not sense his creepiness? I wonder. I mean,
Well, I wonder if he's on the show, he's kind of putting on an act.
Totally probably put on an act.
And then when it comes to actually going on a date with him, but he must have been pretty creepy, right? I mean,
For her to not even go on the date with him.
Right.
For them to just be having that brief
Yeah.
moment together.
okay. So there's a criminal profiler named Pat Brown who actually feels like the dating game appearance and the rejection of Carrie, I almost said Cheryl Bradshaw, might have been an exasperating factor because he does kill much more after this appearance.
Yeah.
According to Brown, one wonders what that did in his mind. That is something he would not take too well. Serial killers don't understand rejection. They think that something is wrong with that girl. She played me. She played hard to get. So he's, according to Pat Brown, I think is a woman actually, you know, this might have triggered him to just to kind of kill more and prove he's sort of in charge. And women aren't going to own him, but I feel like he would have killed anyway. I don't
think
know.
he would have killed anyway, and I think that it's not uncommon for serial killers to ramp up and to escalate no matter what is going on in their lives. That just seems like a very common serial killer
Right.
sort of.
And clearly this is a very brazen move to go on a nationally, like
He's not
a
lying
hugely
low.
popular game show at the time, to go, and it's like dating related with women, to go on that show while you know you're in the middle of killing all these women. I mean, it's insane
He's
to me.
brazen. And
Yeah.
we've talked together before about how narcissistic types, it's the level of like lack of self-awareness can sometimes be so
Well, they like believe
incredible.
all their own
They believe
BS.
all their own shit.
I mean, I don't know that this is on the same level as Ted Bundy kind of killing the women who looked like that girl who rejected him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Or sometimes there's a mother connection
right.
where they're trying to avenge.
Although I'm
ways
sure
their mom
it
treated them.
infuriated him, and maybe it did kind of get him back into the groove.
I personally think he would have killed no matter what, but I don't doubt that.
Maybe it escalated it.
I
though.
don't doubt that wasn't already just built into his personality, because that is the profile. He fits the profile of the narcissistic sociopath,
Right.
violent guy.
Right. Okay. Well, Anyways, the last I'd mentioned before that his last known victim was a 12-year-old girl
Yeah.
earlier, as sort of like a similarity to Ted Bundy. That 12-year-old girl's name was Robin Samso. Now, this took place in Huntington Beach, which is kind of I don't
It's
know, about an hour
it's like an hour
south.
south of here.
Yeah,
It's
it's like a
Orange
pretty
County.
nice beach town,
It
like
is
very
nice.
anyways, he approached Robin and her friends on the beach that day to get them to take pictures in their swimsuits. Now, these girls all were kind of talking to him, and he was actually chased away by a neighbor. He was seen the previous day trying to convince another set of teenage girls to take pictures by giving them marijuana. So he's kind of like lurking around
Yeah.
this little beach town trying to pick up teenage girls like all normal good men. No, I'm just kidding. At some point, after he met these girls on the beach, Robin had to go to ballet class, and she rode a bike. I think she actually borrowed a friend's bike to rush to ballet class. 12 days later, her body was found in the Pasadena foothills of the Sierra Madre, like a very forested area.
So way far away from
Far away,
Huntington Beach.
way far away, yeah. Her body had been ravaged by animals, so it was really hard to identify her. I think she was actually found sooner than 12 days, but that's how long it took for them to be able to say to the mom,
This is
this
your
is your daughter. Her mom's name is Marianne Connolly, and this is some quotes from Marianne about what happened in this period after Robin disappeared. She said, I called the police and said my daughter's missing. They told me that they couldn't take a report for 24 hours. By the next morning, they declared it a kidnapping. As I mentioned, 12 days later, her decomposed remains were found and had been just completely decimated by animals. Connolly goes on to say that authorities finally arrived at her house. The sergeant says, we found Robin. I grabbed my purse and said, okay, let's go. He said, where do you think you're going? I said, I have to go see Robin. The sergeant told her that she wouldn't be able to identify the body because it took 3 days to identify her remains. I got so mad, recalls Connolly. I said, 3 days? How many little girls with long blonde hair disappear in California? And he said, there was no hair. Connolly, according to Connolly, when she speaks of Alcala, he's the devil himself, the devil himself. So, I mean, that's just so sad.
It's heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking to think. I mean, I know it's just the body and it's not the person, but it's probably nice to get this closure and to see, you know what I mean? But you don't want to see this horrible, torn apart remains.
But she can't even say goodbye to the body or have an open casket if that's
right,
something
if
she
that
wants
she
to
wanted.
do.
Yeah, I mean, it's just
It's
sad.
fucked up.
So the good thing was that there was the witnesses, Samso's friends,
And that's pretty brazen in and of itself, too.
right. And they were able to describe him and get a police sketch done that was very accurate. Alcala's former parole officer actually recognized him in this police sketch, so that's how good it was. Based on that, they went to search Alcala's mom's home, which was in Monterey Park at the time. In that search, the police found a rental receipt for a storage locker in Seattle. When they checked this storage locker, they found hundreds of photographs of mostly young girls, either nude or dressed in swimsuits. Alcala himself was in some of the pictures. The locker also contained a pair of earrings, which belonged to Samso. So it was like a trophy he had put in this locker in Washington. Another pair of earrings that seemed to be like something he took from his victims. There was another pair of earrings that had the DNA of a woman named Charlotte Lamb, who was 31-year-old and was killed in her apartment building laundry room in El Segundo in 1978. I mean, during this period, throughout the 70s, as I've mentioned before, he did this thing where he was taking professional fashion photography, and he
Right.
would sell himself this way
As a
to
legit
potential victims.
photographer.
Yeah. So there was hundreds of pictures of women and some young men in this photo kind of treasure trove of photos that they found in this locker. He also had like a portfolio that he would show his coworkers when he worked at the LA Times. It was kind of reminded me a bit of the Bob Crane, where he's like proudly showing these
proud of it.
pictures, and people are like,
Dude, I don't want to see
these
that.
are really sexually explicit. Like there was nudes.
And they were, was he showing pictures of underage girls?
I think he didn't show the underage girl pictures. According to one of his coworkers at the LA Times, I thought it was weird, but I was young. I didn't know anything. When I asked why he took the photos, he said their moms asked him to. So maybe they were some of the young girls.
So he was also being sexually harassing his coworkers,
I guess,
too.
yeah. I mean,
that's, I
Right.
consider that sexual harassment.
but exactly. I remember the girls were naked. He said he was professional. So in my mind, I was being a model for him. Another woman who was photographed by him said the portfolio included spread after spread of naked teenage boys as well. And as I mentioned before, the photos were all kind of sexually explicit. So it's just another like nervy thing that you would show people this as if it's a completely normal hobby.
Yeah, the
right?
gall of this guy.
So after finding this stuff, obviously they have enough evidence to arrest him, and he was arrested in late 1979, held without bail, and was eventually tried in 1980, convicted, and sentenced to death for Samso's murder. The verdict was overturned, though,
Wow.
because jurors had been informed of his prior sex crimes.
So that wasn't admissible in the case?
No, and that's like always very
That's
infuriating to me because it's
insane.
like we all know sexual crimes in particular
Yeah.
are chronic. Like this is someone who's doing it.
This is a pattern of behavior. This is something
Right.
that
I always find it so infuriating that stuff is not admissible. It's like how could that not be something you need to know?
You
Like
need
oh,
to
he's
know.
done this before numerous times. Like
that's infuriating.
right. I mean, I get that maybe once in a blue moon there's someone who stops, but like, and they shouldn't be convicted because they had, but why can't that be part of the evidence? Like jurors are supposed to navigate evidence and not convict based on one, you know what I
To
mean?
me,
Like,
that says it all. If somebody has a history of sexual violence, they're probably not going to stop.
right. But that could be why they don't want to admit it. Cause then you would be like, oh, they probably did it and not based on what happened in that case.
Right.
You might be saying, oh, obviously he did it, even if the evidence doesn't
I
prove
just
it.
don't get
In
it.
this case, though, the evidence was compelling
supported.
regardless of the past convictions, sorry.
Well, it also fits the profile of this guy,
Right.
too, and his motives.
So he was tried again in 1986.
That's a long ass time. Was he not in jail?
He was in jail all this time.
Oh, he was still in jail. Okay.
So he, well, there probably was the conviction, and then by the time it was overturned, might have been a few years. I don't have like the exact timeline.
Right.
But he wasn't released from prison.
Okay.
He was convicted again and sentenced to death. This time, it was overturned for another reason.
Shut up.
The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the one that all the conservatives hate because they're super liberal, and it is frustrating. But he was, at some point, the park ranger who found Samso's body had been hypnotized by police investigators.
What?
And I guess the trial judge did not allow a witness to back up the defense's claim that the park ranger who found her body had been hypnotized, and I guess that's not allowed, and they weren't allowed to like bring in defense of why that maybe was negatively affecting him. So that was, I kind of was reading a lot and I couldn't quite figure out what was wrong with that, but maybe finding out information under hypnosis is not
Like it's coerced. in
solid.
some way?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so while obviously he's going on trial again, they're not letting him off, right?
Good.
So while preparing for the third trial in 2003, there was a new
Wait,
state
the
law.
third trial wasn't
until 2003, yeah.
Damn.
There was a new state law at this time, though, that allowed them to test his DNA against unsolved murder cases that kind of fit the profile.
Yeah.
Semen had been left at several rape murder scenes in Los Angeles, in particular of 2 women. There was another cold case DNA match in 2004. So by the time he went back on trial for the 3rd time, 4 additional women had been added to the case.
Like
as
cold cases.
Cold cases. So he had 4 additional women that were considered his victims at that point. So one was Jill Barcombe, 18, a New York runaway, who was found up in a Los Angeles ravine in 1977. She was actually originally thought to be a victim of the Hillside Strangler, and it was him. So he was kind of connected to that case in a weird way. Georgia Wickstead, who was 27, she was bludgeoned to death in her Malibu apartment in 1977. I mentioned before Charlotte Lamb, who was 31, raped, strangled in the laundry room of her El Segundo apartment complex. And then Jill Parento, 21, who was killed in a Burbank apartment in 1979. All of the bodies were posed in carefully chosen positions. So they were just really connected. And they were all added to his case. So during his incarceration between the 2nd and 3rd trials, Alcala actually wrote and self-published a book called You, the Jury, where he proclaims his innocence in the Samso case and suggests different suspects. He also had filed lawsuits against the California penal system for an incident that happened where he got injured slipping and falling in prison, and also for refusing to provide him with a low-fat diet.
Oh, shut the fuck up.
I know.
Jesus.
I feel like prison food is pretty carb heavy. But yeah, Subway Jared
gained.
He didn't seem to care.
He gained a lot of weight.
He's like, finally, I can fill my pants out again. So, as I mentioned before, in 2010, that was the start of the 3rd trial, and that's probably where I first heard of Rodney Alcala.
Okay.
Because it was a pretty big story in LA at the time. And then they were really pushing that dating game connection.
Right.
So that's my first memory. And I do remember thinking, like, who is this guy? Like, I've never heard this case.
I mean, it is eerie to have someone who's a serial killer.
I think also at that time, it's like the internet and social media, everyone's like playing this clip. It was like real clickbait, right?
That's what
like
I'm saying.
The dating game.
There isn't a ton of footage. I mean, like that kind of footage where it's there. I mean, I don't know of many or any instances now that I think about it of footage of a serial killer that isn't connected to them doing either an interview while they're in prison or trial footage.
But I feel like this was probably the first time a lot of people saw that clip of this guy.
Right.
You know, because you might have seen like a bit on the news, but to be able to watch it all.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. It's super eerie to watch this clip, which is not connected to him being a murderer. It's not like a trial clip. It's just like this like happy-go-lucky, cheesy 70s dating game.
Well, there was like another story that I kept seeing pop up when I was researching this one we should probably do at some point. And he was a game show. He's called like the Game Show Killer. Yeah. And he was on a popular game show. So it is weird to kind of see them on these, just doing these dorky ass. Like,
yeah. Oh, by the way, I Google imaged him.
Rodney Alcala?
He is so stupid looking. Like now he's
There's
so
like a lot
stupid.
of different looks though, because he has short hair and a mustache now. Like the last thing I saw of him in prison.
Okay, but there's also this picture of him
like
that's pretty recently with like these gray Kenny G ringlets.
Oh yeah, he has got the Kenny G.
It's like salt and pepper.
He looks like a
ringlets.
Marin County like hippie woman with that like kind of like gray, like they don't dye their hair. So in 2010, 31 years after Samso's murder, the 3rd trial was held. Orange County Senior Deputy District Attorney Matt Murphy said in an interview with the LA Weekly, the 70s in California was insane as far as treatment of sexual predators. Rodney Alcala is a poster boy for this. It's a total comedy of outrageous stupidity. And I think that's a lot what we were talking about earlier, this like letting them out for rehabilitation. So luckily those things have changed.
Yes.
It's insane to me that was ever even considered a good idea. Because what other crime gets that kind of treatment? And why would sex crimes of all, things be treated that way.
I mean, I'd like to think, we do know more
Right.
now.
That just seems like a no-brainer to me, though.
Right.
Like, why would you let them out? Tony Rakakis, who was the Orange County DA at the time, called Alcala the poster child for the death penalty.
He's the poster child for needs a deep conditioner. If you look at his ringlets, like there's a picture of him where they look pretty fried.
It's very crunchy. So I think I mentioned already the four victims now are going to be added to this case. And in the third trial, another big change is that Alcala acted as his own attorney.
This guy just keeps topping.
Well, that's also very similar to Ted Bundy because he did that, right?
Yeah, he did.
In his last trial.
But this just is such a testament to him thinking how smart
arrogant.
He is. He's such an arrogant narcissist.
So he took the stand in his own defense, and for 5 hours he did the role of witness and interrogator, asking himself questions, and he even would address himself as Mr. Alcala in a deeper than normal voice.
Gross.
So he even did like this little gimmicky Mr. Alcala. He's just like so stupid. Like, what was he running back and forth to like?
He's like putting on a hat and stuff.
Yeah, putting on like
a mustache.
Yeah, super fun. According to everyone who witnessed this, and I would love to find some clips of this, it was like a really bizarre. This questioning and answering session was beyond like theatrical.
To find that clip.
Yeah. He rambled on in a monotone. He claimed that he was at Knott's Berry Farm applying for a job as a photographer during the time of Robin Samso's kidnapping and murder, which is like, dude, can you stop bringing up the photography? Like, you idiot. He actually showed the jury his appearance on the dating game. And that was an attempt to prove that the earrings found in the locker were his and not Samson's.
He wasn't wearing earrings on the dating game.
Right. Jed Mills comes back into play here. And he told reporters at the time that earrings in 1978 weren't socially acceptable yet for men, which I don't know is necessarily true. He said, I had never seen a man with an earring in his ear, and I would have noticed them on Rodney if he had been wearing them. Rodney actually made no attempts at disputing the 4 additional charges other than saying he didn't remember killing any of the women, which is like an amazingly blasé. Right. I don't recall.
I don't remember.
How do you not remember? Like, it's either a yes or no, right?
Right.
In his closing arguments, he played Arlo Guthrie's Alice's Restaurant.
What the fuck is wrong with this guy?
In that song, the protagonist tells a psychiatrist that he wants to kill. Okay, I mean, this guy is insane, right? After less than 2 days deliberation, the jury convicted him on all 5 counts of first-degree murder. There was a surprise witness during the penalty phase of the trial, and that was Tali Shapiro, Alcala's first known victim, the 8-year-old girl he left for dead, basically, after beating and raping her. And she kind of acted as a witness for justice for the victims who obviously couldn't be there because they didn't survive.
To basically corroborate, yes, this guy.
And it was during the penalty phase, so it was, she didn't testify, but she was there as, I guess, when victims get to speak, that sort of period. Or maybe she just showed up. Maybe she actually didn't speak. I don't have any indication that she did. So I think the defense's only witness was the psychiatrist named Richard Rappaport, and he testified that Alcala's borderline personality disorder was the reason he had no memory of committing the murders. But the prosecution argued that he was a sexual predator who knew what he was doing was wrong and didn't care. In March of 2010, he was sentenced to death once again for the 3rd time. And so far, so good. That has stuck. The pictures I mentioned before, all of those photos that they found in the locker room. In March of 2010, so right after he was convicted, the Huntington Beach and the New York City Police Department released 120 of those photos to the public in order to start helping identify them to see if they could possibly be missing persons or, Jane Doe's, like undeclared bodies. There was over 900 photos that could not be released because they were too sexually explicit. 21 women have come forward identifying themselves as of the printing of this article that it was from. And 6 families believe they recognized loved ones who disappeared years ago and were never found. There was only one woman that was actually connected to a missing person or unsolved murder in one of the photographs, and that was Christine Thornton, 28, whose body was found in Wyoming in 1982. As of September 2016, 110 of those photos are still online, so you can go look at them and see if you identify anybody or have any information on those women.
The photos that weren't too sexually.
Yeah. So basically, they didn't
suggestive.
put any of those sexual ones. So these are a lot of like almost
Bikini?
headshot looking ones. The
That
ones
he
I saw.
took. These are all
Yeah.
photographs he took.
So they're basically trying to identify these women or
Yeah.
seeing. It might not be anything. They could all. They're not necessarily all dead or
Runaways or
yeah.
kidnapped.
After he was convicted in 2010 in California, he was actually pursued by New York authorities for the murders of Cornelia Criley, the TWA flight attendant,
Yeah.
and Ellen Hover, the Ciro's heiress. He was extradited to New York in June of 2012. He entered a not guilty plea on both counts, but then he eventually did change the pleas to guilty, saying that he wanted to return to California and pursue his appeals on his death penalty conviction. He was sentenced to 25 years to life in New York for those crimes. But I think the California one overrides everything. He also, in 2010, was named as a person of interest in the unsolved murders of Antoinette Whitaker, who was 13 at the time, and Joyce Gaunt, 17-year-old. And that was in Washington State, Seattle. And he was up there at some point,
Yeah.
as we know, from the locker, etc. There are other cold cases that he's sort of targeted by in investigations, more in California, New York, New Hampshire, and Arizona. In March of 2011, Marin County, California, which is north of San Francisco,
Holla.
yeah, Rachel's hometown, they were pretty confident that Alcala was responsible for the 1977 murder of 19-year-old Pamela Jean Lamson, who disappeared after going into San Francisco to Fisherman's Wharf to meet a man who offered to photograph her. Her body was found in Marin County near a hiking trail, but police, there's no DNA or fingerprints or any physical evidence like that, but I think she just fits a lot of the criteria, and he was in the area at the time.
Well, there was also a murderer who was murdering young women on a trail in the 70s in Marin County.
Oh, really?
The trailside killer, I think was his name.
And then, obviously, I mentioned before the Wyoming woman, Christine Ruth Thornton. She had disappeared in 1977, and she's pretty much the only one that a relative recognized her from a photo in his portfolio that the police posted online. And then with DNA evidence, they matched tissue samples to her remains, so they kind of tied it all together. Alcala admitted that he took the photo, but he didn't admit to killing her, and she was also 6 months pregnant at the time of her death.
Wow.
So as I said before, she's the first person who's actually been sort of found as a murder victim by those photos. And Alcala now is in his 70s, and he said he was too ill to make the journey to kind of face a trial on the death of Christine Thornton. He is, as I said before, on death row, and he's
in California.
He's in California at Corcoran, which is like a big state prison. So he was convicted for the 5 murders, the 4 additional victims, and the young girl, Robin. He also has the 25 years to life sentence in New York, which is inconsequential. His true victim count has never really been figured out exactly. According to him, he's killed between 50 and 100 women.
He said he killed 50 and 100 women, so he finally did admit.
I guess, like, I saw this information. That's what they're saying. I don't know I don't know exactly what. If he finally is admitting it, or who knows? Just reporting, or maybe. I mean, that's what it says. It says according to him, he claims this in this article I read. As I said, there was like a lot of unifying things about the women. The victims all ranged 8 and 31. They were all women. As I said, he usually approached them with the promises of photography. He did the whole thing, the raping, beating, strangling, which he used several different things, or sometimes with a blunt object, he would hit them. I mentioned the torturing. And then I mentioned the last few ones that he posed them in positions.
Like the Hillside Stranglers.
Yeah, and then he also had the earring trophies
Right.
for several of them. So yeah, he's still alive, and he'll probably never be put to death. I mean, he's in his 70s at this point.
And he has the mustache now. Is that his
now
current
his hair,
hairstyle?
I think, is short with the mustache, which is very Angela Bono too. He kind of is connected to because he also kind of reminds me of Richard Ramirez because he's Hispanic and he has that look with the long kind of wavy hair in the 70s
and cheekbones.
Yeah, he has like
he
the
has
cheekbones,
the Richard Ramirez,
but it's kind of like this
cheekbones.
Hillside Strangler, Bundy, Ramirez.
It's a very 70s,
mishmash.
80s Los Angeles serial killer.
And as I mentioned before, there is a movie that you can watch online. I don't think I needed to put an ID or a code in or anything. It was on Discovery, Investigation Discovery.
Yeah.
And it's called The Dating Game Killer. The guy from Scandal, Huck, his name is Guillermo Diaz, plays him.
Is he good?
It's pretty good. I only watched like the first 20 or so minutes.
Right.
And then I don't know, I had to do something. But
Right.
I'll probably finish it.
It's worth watching.
I mean, it was fine. It's like a TV movie.
I love bad
I like
TV
kind of bad
movies.
TV movies too.
That's totally my
I was
thing.
trying to watch The Deliberate Stranger the other day, but I couldn't find a version online. So yeah, I like bad
I'm into
true
it.
crime movies.
into it.
So this is not too old. I mean, it's just from a few years ago.
Yeah.
And it was good enough. It was fine. It was interesting. I mean, the story is interesting. So
It is interesting.
I'm definitely gonna try to check it out or finish watching it, and I recommend it. I think.
I'm going to have a lot of fun posting the pictures this week.
And the clips, the video clips.
And the video clips.
Yeah.
I really need everyone to follow us on Instagram at Hollywood Crime Scene.
Right.
Just so you guys can really see this guy's, like, the level.
He has so many looks.
He has so many different hairstyles.
And they're all very distinct. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. And the dating game clip we'll probably post. We could probably post it to Twitter.
We'll post it on Twitter.
And in the Facebook group, which
Yeah.
you should definitely join.
Which you should.
And then also, please, if you have time, click some 5 stars for us on iTunes.
Yeah.
It really helps us. I
If
think
you
we
like
finally
us.
broke 100.
We're at like 106
reviews.
reviews right now.
So yeah, it really helps. So if you could just click 5 stars, like it takes 2 seconds.
I also want to give a shout out to our friend who PayPal'd us this week.
Oh, right. Yeah, that was amazing. Thank you.
That was such a sweet note that you left us. Thank you so much. You know who you are. I'm totally missing the name right now.
We'll
my
get
own
you
fault.
on the mini-sode.
Yeah, we'll get you on the mini-sode because you were...
Yeah, that was a really nice note.
The note that you left us was so
The
sweet.
subway, right?
Yeah, she was on the subway.
She listens to us on the subway.
Yeah.
So
It was so sweet.
we like
Thank
it.
you.
We're happy to help.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
New Year.
I don't want no meat. I don't want no meat. Just more taters.